The Disruptor. The day we are due to see Clive Woodward is one of those airless, baking days in mid-July 2022, when you can barely move, let alone travel. So we agreed to meet by Zoom and, while we are waiting, Lawrence gives a typically firm opinion on Sir Clive. Lawrence says, "If Clive hadn't been with the team, I don't think we would ever have won the World Cup." Really? Even though the cynical take is to look at the talent pool, the depth and quality of that England squad and say, with a generation like that, surely anyone could have done it. Lawrence tells me, no, that's terrible. I mean, it's just wrong. Wholeheartedly wrong. Ever since the World Cup started in 1987, we've had a whole load of decent players, and we've still managed to screw it up royally. The 1991 team had an incredible group, and they didn't win it. So I disagree with that. The reality was that Clive completely redefined rugby in a way that people probably don't recognise. And at that point, on our laptops, the Woodward's Zoom starts to connect. It is not just Clive. It is Jane, his wife, too, which Clive had requested and, actually, seems only appropriate. All these years on, it would be easy to forget how much of a presence Jane had been, and how influential around the edges. It was Jane who saw it as her duty to get to know the wives and girlfriends of the players and ensure that they felt part of the community too. "Hi, love," she greets Lawrence. "How are you?" She asks after Alice and their children. This is another interview that starts like a family reunion. Lawrence recalls one of Clive's first podium addresses to the squad, back in 1997. He says, "You asked us, what do you want to achieve in your England careers? And everyone sort of looked fairly blank, and no one really said very much. You said, well, come on, I need to hear it from you. Do you want to be the best team in the world? Or do you just want to be the best team in Europe? Because the last time we all looked at the World Cup, I don't think there was any team in Europe who'd had their name engraved on it." Clive chuckles at his old self and replies, "There's no doubt about that. I just saw the enemy as the Southern Hemisphere. I didn't see the enemy as the Five Nations. I saw it as the All Blacks, South Africa, Australia. That's what we had to measure ourselves against, and that's what I made very, very clear. They were the games I wanted us to peak for, especially playing away from home. Can we go down there and do this? This is what I think you'd not heard before. We'd always set so much stall on Grand Slams and Five Nations, then Six Nations, but that wasn't the benchmark. Every time we got to a World Cup, we got smashed. So we had to change the mindset. I was England's first full-time professional coach, so, as I saw it, we had no excuses. It was just a great opportunity for me. In the business world and everything I've done, I like to disrupt. That's a positive term. You're trying to take things to a new level. In rugby, to be a disruptor, even moving hotels was seen as a real kind of no-no. You don't do that sort of thing. But that's what I was able to do. Maybe it was exactly because of this, rugby's historical conservatism, that a disruptor to some was a crazy professor to others. Yes, Clive says, and he's not wholly amused by it either. I did read somewhere that I was called a crazy professor. I mean, if they'd called me a disruptor, I would have thought it was a compliment. My big thing was, I don't think I'm a mad professor. I analyse things really carefully before we do anything, and if I think it's going to work, we're going to try it. For example, when Woodward was appointed, he spent a fortnight in the United States, mainly with the Denver Broncos, to see what another proper professional sport looked like. Every top coach goes on these kinds of fact-finding, information-sharing missions these days, but back then, in rugby, no one. And when he was with the Broncos, he saw how a team of different coaches operated together, but all with different specialisations. In rugby union, this was unheard of. Woodward, however, got the message loud and clear. One of the first things he did when he returned from that trip was to appoint Phil Larder as England's defence coach. At that point, no other team in international rugby had one of those. Jane tells us that there was all the noise in the media area about how many backroom staff does he need? Clive replies, "Yes. Who are these people? What are all their jobs?" Everything I did made total sense to me, so we had to try it. So I don't think I was a mad professor at all. I think I was a disruptor. And I like to think the end result justified the means.